Karnataka Cardiology Academy. Very nice that I am part of this, and I thank my friend Dr. Desai for arranging me to be here with you. And I'm going to share you something about alpha and beta errors and the understanding of those things. It's important for all of us to realize this particular phrase, idam na mama. What is that? Idam, this, na mama, not mine. None is mine. Everything is God. Everything is God's will. Means we have no kartrutva, no bhoktatva of doing anything or enjoying anything. Whatever He destines, we are doing it with that concept. Let us open this talk. Now, you see a bank there and a man with a sort of dollars or cash in his hand, and there is a Volkswagen Beetle, blue Beetle is waiting there. All of us presume that he has probably taken money from the bank, either from his account or he has stolen it, and he is going towards the car. Now it's a person in the blue. He has seen a person going with the cash in hand into the blue Beetle there, the Volkswagen. And he has noticed he is a brown guy with an orange dress and 5 feet 10 inches tall. That's the evidence he collected while he saw that. The assumption is either he would have taken the cash from his own account, or he would have robbed this one. And then there was a report about some bank robbery on the same day from the same bank. And so police started investigating for a guy who is orange colored in his skin complexion, and he is having a Volkswagen blue Beetle. They found one and brought him onto the court. And then he is before the judge, and the blue fellow is the evidence there. And then the green one is the prosecutor, public prosecutor, who is trying him to prove him guilty. And the court always assumes until proved guilty, everybody is innocent. Here I share a little joke. Sometime back, Isaac Newton was said that unless proved otherwise, everyone is a fool. Okay, so similarly here, the court assumes that everyone is innocent until proven guilty. So we have to prove and get the evidence. So this is the null hypothesis. Now, the null hypothesis, any one of our studies, it's called H0 or null hypothesis, which means there is no association between factor A and factor B, or drug A or drug B, proportion A, proportion B. They are the same. There is no difference between them. There is no difference between them. They are the same. And that hypothesis has to be disproved. Likewise, a person who is innocent otherwise has to be proved to be guilty before he can be punished. Okay. Now, when the guiltiness is proved by what is called the evidence there, and let me see, pointer option is a pointer. So when the evidence is there, then the court looks at the evidence and then decides whether this man is guilty or not. So how much evidence you require to say that drug A is better than drug B, or treatment A is better than treatment B, or proportion A is better than proportion B? That is our question. Then we reject the null hypothesis. What is the null hypothesis? Everyone is innocent until proved. Otherwise, that means there is no difference, there is no association between A and B. That is, there is no difference between the two proportions or the two drugs in efficacy or the two treatments there. That is a null hypothesis. We conclude that there is a difference. A is better than B or B is better than A based on some evidence. That is what is the evidence that we generate by doing different studies. And this evidence, if it is 50%, would you accept this person to be guilty? No, that appears like tossing a coin. I don't want to accept and say this guy is guilty when I have 50% chance. Maybe 20%, still very high. I don't want 20% of people, innocent people, to be punished. 5%, maybe yes, but that is where exactly we take that, and that is when your level of significance are 5%. But in the court of law, 5% also is not acceptable. 1% for all the crimes, normal crimes where it is being jailed or sort of fined, and 0.1% when there is death penalty. That is 1 in 1,000 chance only he should be innocent. Otherwise, we cannot punish him. This is the way court goes. Why this example here? So there are four things that can happen with that fellow. The fellow is really innocent and jury says that he is innocent and they do not reject the null hypothesis, accept the null hypothesis. Excellent conclusion, because innocent person is not punished. And the second one is the fellow is really a guilty man. He has taken the money out of the bank and the jury rejects his innocence, means rejects the null hypothesis and accepts the alternate hypothesis that he is a guilty man and he is framed. That's also excellent. A guilty man is framed and an innocent man is left out. We have no problem with both the scenarios. Now you see, the jury rejects his innocence and calls him as guilty and puts him under the bar, though he is innocent. So innocent guy is, the jury has rejected the innocence, rejected the null hypothesis and put him in the bars, which is rather unfortunate. An innocent man is punished here. And the level at which they do that is 1% in case of judicial things, and we do it at 5% normally. We'll come to that a little later. Now, the jury does not reject his innocence, and he says the jury still thinks that he is innocent, but he is really a guilty guy who has taken the money out of the bank and he is walking scot-free. And that is very unfortunate. That is another situation. Now we have two correct conclusions and two errors in our judgment. Let us see what the errors are. This is correct. Okay, innocent man not punished, guilty man punished. Excellent. An innocent man is framed. This is called type 1 error, also called the alpha error. And this is usually kept in clinical trials at 5%, also called P0.5, we say P0.05. And that is the alpha error. We come to that, a little more discussion on that. Now we have got here the fellow who is left scot-free and he is going, I've got out of it and I'm going to do it again. He's thinking, and that fellow, we are committing an error called the beta error by releasing a guilty man without punishing. Okay, let's get into another situation. Now you see, we have two types of error, type 1 error and type 2 error. These are two types of error. These occur every time we take any decision in routine life also, even while making a cup of coffee also. So put a little extra sugar, then add less sugar. Then when you taste, you know you have an error there. H0 is the null hypothesis. HA is the alternate hypothesis. So what I need to do is, from the population, I do a study and then okay. So this population is the bigger, this one is the population there, the circle. And we are not going to study entire Bangalore or Karnataka to find out a thing is happening or not in our clinical study. We just do what we call as, we just do the a sample of that. We take a, say 500 fellows or 600 fellows and do a study and then prepare a statistic out of it. This statistic has to either disprove H0 or accept the other hypothesis. This statistic is the probability of having this result from that study population out of the bigger population of Bangalore or Karnataka or India, given that H0 is true. Probability value of this statistic, given that H0 is true, given that there is no difference between A and B treatment, and such a probability, we call it as the H0 is true, and the statistic that is called is known as the p-value there, the p-value. And here, this p-value is equal to, is also known as less than 0.0 alpha, is also called alpha error, alpha, and that is, if it is less than the alpha, then we reject the null hypothesis. If it is more than the alpha, we do not reject the null hypothesis or fail to reject the null hypothesis. So when we reject the null hypothesis, we commit an error of alpha. When we fail to reject the null hypothesis, then the value that we got statistic is more than the alpha that we have set. Usually it is set at 0.05. And let us now go to the reality situation here. We'll draw what is the reality here in a second. So the type 1 error is what we are saying is about the alpha error there. And then now the reality is null hypothesis is true. That means treatment A is not different from treatment B, let us say. Or the reality could be treatment A is different from the treatment B. That is null hypothesis is false. That is reality. We can't get the reality unless we study the entire Bangalore, entire Karnataka, entire India. We can't do that. So we do a study and we have two situations. We reject the null hypothesis or fail to reject the null hypothesis at the end of the study. So in reality, there is null hypothesis which is true or false, or reject the null hypothesis or accept the null hypothesis. When it is true in reality and we reject the null hypothesis, we are committing an error because what is true we have rejected. So that error is type 1 error. That error is type 1 error. When the null hypothesis is true, we have rejected the null hypothesis, accepted that there is a difference. Null hypothesis was no difference. We accepted the difference. This type 1 error is usually it is called the alpha error. It corresponds to the statistic that we set up front. That is usually set in clinical trials as 5% level, which means 95% I want to be certain that the result will come if I repeat the experiment n number of times, and 5% of the time I'm prepared to accept the error that null hypothesis is falsely rejected. Okay, and then we have a scenario where null hypothesis is true, and we also said we have not rejected it. That's the correct conclusion. That's no problem. The null hypothesis is false, but we rejected the null hypothesis. That's also good because we rejected the null hypothesis when it is false, and that's the correct conclusion. Then we have a situation where we hang on to the null hypothesis when in fact there is a difference between the groups when the null hypothesis is false, and that error is called the type 2 error or the beta error. You understand? So these are the 4 situations that we have, and let us go with clinical some examples where you can understand. Okay, in the above example, in truth, he is a robber and the court has convicted him. That is a correct decision. In truth, he is innocent and the jury has left him. That's also a correct decision. But look at here, this box where the guy is innocent, but the court has convicted and put him in the bars, behind the bars. This is a wrongly punished guy, which we don't want to happen. Likewise, in truth, this fellow is a robber, but the court acquitted him for lack of enough evidence, and that is a falsely left out, and this is also not worthy, not correct. So we don't want to have people, ignorant people punished, innocent people punished, and we don't want criminals to be let out. But how to optimize that? And these are the 2 types of errors. You remember, the red one is called the alpha error, the orange one is called the beta error there. Let me go to that. So there is a match going on, cricket match final between India and Pakistan, World Cup final, and then Virat Kohli is at the crease, and there are all the DRS options India has exhausted, and umpire has given a decision, Kohli is out. Everybody is unhappy. The truth is Virat Kohli is LBW in truth, and the batsman is given out by the umpire, correct decision. The bowler appealed very severely, vociferously. Umpire says batsman is not out. Virat Kohli is also not before the wicket, and so there is a correct decision. No problem. But here, when Virat Kohli is not before the wicket, when the umpire has ruled him LBW, there is no way of appealing. All the DRS appeals are over. This is a wrong decision. He is given out, and this is called an error of commission. He has committed an error that this fellow is out when he is really not out in truth. And that is called alpha error or type 1 error. Whereas in truth, Virat Kohli was the LBW, but the bowler shouted 5 times. But the other captain also started complaining, but the umpire stuck to his guns and says, no, he is not out. And that means he is falsely let off, and that is a beta error or type 2 error. So see, it happens every time in our life. Now a girl wanted to get married and she has chosen a groom. She wanted to choose a groom and she has chosen a groom who is very worthy and found out that him to be acceptable and she married him. That's the correct decision. When she screened some guys and then found them not worthy and she rejected the groom, that's also excellent. But look at the scenario. She picked up a guy who is really unworthy and accepted him as her life partner. That is a wrong choice or commission, error of commission or type 1 error. The other way around, there is a wonderful guy who is a very worthy guy, but this girl, failed to pick him up as her life partner, wrongly rejected or type 2 error. This means type 1 and type 2 errors are always with us. Buy a mobile phone, same table you can put it. And you do anything, you can put the same table. Now, let us get into a sort of situation where we are comparing two treatments, treatment A and treatment B. Treatment A and treatment B, the null hypothesis is there is no difference. But we found out in our study that there is a difference. So in truth, A is better than B and you concluded that way, it's fine, it's a correct decision. In truth, A is not better than B, they are both are same. You also concluded by your study it's the same, it is excellent. No problem, we have not committed any error in that. But when they are same and there's no difference between treatment A and treatment B or proportion A and proportion B or intervention A and intervention B or city A and city B, then you say that one is superior to the other, then you are committing an error which is called the type 1 error. When in fact, when one is better than the other, you reject and fail to find out that one is better than the other and say that they are same. No, these two proportions are same. These two drugs are same. You conclude by your study and that is type 2 error. Why do these errors occur? Because we have not studied the entire global population. What we are doing is we are studying a small sample and trying to predict what will happen in truth. This is man wants to do little work and predict better thing. That's agreeable, no problem. Because of feasibility, time, money, acceptability and all that, all of us do these trials and then come out with an answer and try to generalize. In fact, if possible to that city, if possible to that state, if possible to that country, and if possible to the entire globe. There is a price we pay for that, and that price is type 1 error and type 2 error. When does type 1 error occur? When they are same, that means when the null hypothesis is true, we say they are different. When null hypothesis is that same in the global level, but we say from our study that one is different than the other, we commit a type 1 error, error of commission. The other way around, when the one is better than the other, we fail to recognize the difference. That is called type 2 error. These are called negative trials. These are also called trials of equivalency. Whatever it is, this is type 2 error. How do I ward off this? I can decrease the beta error and increase the power here. What is power? Power is 1 minus beta. 1 beta is 20% usually. 1 minus beta is power. Supposing I set the power at 90%, then probably I will be committing error, this error less. This error usually is kept at 0.05. It's the alpha error. When do I want to be more strict? Let's say 0.01. That means I don't want to take a chance. I want to be 99% certain that when I reject the null hypothesis, it is really true that I have rejected correctly, 99 out of 100, only 1% chance for the null hypothesis to be true. That is important when the intervention is very costly, very time consuming, very invasive, and very unacceptable to the community, to the person. Then you need to peg the alpha error much lower rather than 0.05. But when do I keep it higher than 0.05? Let's say I'm testing a new intervention for COVID, maybe convalescent plasma or some antiviral drug or an antimalarial drug. Then even if it is working a little bit, I will take a chance of 10% error. And if it is working, I would like to pick up and I will raise the alpha error to 0.1. There's nothing wrong. When there's no other treatment available, there's nothing wrong to raise the alpha error and do the trial. So remember, alpha error is committed when you reject the null hypothesis, in fact, when it is true. Beta error is committed, you fail to reject the null hypothesis, when in truth, it is not correct. That means null hypothesis is wrong, alternate hypothesis should be picked up. Okay, let us go a little bit. Okay, now, so the reality is, there is a difference between the groups, or there is no difference between the groups. The study said there is a difference between the groups. In reality, there is a difference between the groups, and that is a true positive, also called 1 minus beta or the power. There is no difference. Both the treatments, both the population proportions, both the means are same. That is the negative, but you conclude that there is a difference. You are entering into what is called false positive conclusion, also called type 1 error, also called alpha error. The level is 0.05 or 5%. When in reality, there is a difference between the groups, you fail to recognize the difference by your study. That is a false negative study or a type 2 error. Usually beta is 0.2, the power is 1 minus beta, which is 80%. Now, I'm going to give you some questions. You'll see whether you'll be able to answer. A National Registry for Hypertension in USA published the overall prevalence as 15% hypertension in USA. And we would like to check. Dr. Iyengar has given me a project and asked me to check. Dr. Sharma, you go and find out whether that 15% holds good in our community in Bangalore. And you do a random sample study of 1 lakh people all over Bangalore, do some cluster sampling, and then come out with a number and tell me whether it is 15% just like in US or less or more. That is the situation. Dr. Iyengar has given me the study. So I went about the study. The null hypothesis is our prevalence is same as the US prevalence. It's no different from the US prevalence. Let's say that is the null hypothesis. The alternate hypothesis is our prevalence is either low or high in a significant manner than the 15%. This is the alternate hypothesis. By doing the study, we either accept the null hypothesis or reject the null hypothesis. In doing so, we have seen that we commit 2 types of errors, type 1 and type 2. What are these? See the statement 1. We conclude from the sample, Bangalore's hypertension prevalence is not 15%, when in reality, it is not. The reality is it is not. If you do the entire Bangalore, entire Karnataka, you may get it is not, but you also concluded that it is not 15%. An excellent conclusion, no problem, no error made. The truth it is not, and you also concluded it is not, there's no problem. See, look here, we conclude from the sample that Bangalore's hypertension prevalence is not 15%, when in fact it is 15%. When it in reality it is 15%, but our study we have concluded that it is much more or much less, significantly more or less. There we made an error. What sort of error is that? You please, keep thinking and tell me what sort of error. We conclude from the sample that Bangalore's hypertension prevalence is 15%, when in reality it is. That's quite nice because it is in reality it is 15%. We also got an answer 15%. No error committed. Very fine. The last one, we conclude from the sample, Bangalore's hypertension prevalence is 15%, when it is in fact not. When it is not 15%, we have concluded that it is 15%. This is the situation. What is this? We rejected whether they rejected the null hypothesis or accepted. You think over and let me know the answers. In a second, I am giving the answer here. Type 1 error is 2 and type 2 error is statement number 4. Why? Type 1 error is, we have said that it is not 15%. We rejected our null hypothesis and accepted our also alternative hypothesis, when in fact the reality is the null hypothesis. That is type 1 error. Type 2 error is, we have said it is 15%, when in reality it is not. It is not 15% in reality, but we failed to pick up the difference and still clung on to our null hypothesis, which is a beta error or type 2 error. There is one more slide. With that, I'm going to close it and look at this. We conclude our, so this is a study which Dr. Desai has given me. The earlier Dr. Iyengar has given, and this study he has given me to do it. Dr. Shamal had us do a study of 500 fellows. We have really developed a new statin by our CCA, that is Karnataka Cardiac Academy. A cardiology academy has developed a statin. Let us compare that with the rosuvastatin, a standard drug by all our cardiologists. And I said, okay, sir, we will do it. The null hypothesis is our statin CCA is no better than rosuvastatin. Okay? The alternate hypothesis is our statin is better than rosuvastatin. Look here, if our statin is worse, we are not interested. We are only interested in one direction. If ours is better than the rosuva. Sometimes we'll be interested to know where CCA is better or rosuva is better. That is called a two-tailed distribution. Whereas when we look at only one side, it's called one-tailed. That's a little away. We'll see that. Identify which statement represents type 1 error and type 2 error committed by us. Null hypothesis, both the statins are same. Alternate hypothesis, our statin from our Dr. Desai is superior to the rosuvastatin. Okay, the first statement, we conclude our CCA statin is no better than rosuvastatin when reality they are the same. The reality they are same, we also concluded that they are no different. That is the conclusion, no problem. We conclude our CCA is no better than rosuvastatin. In reality, it is better than rosuvastatin. In reality, it is better, but we fail to pick up the difference. We fail to reject the null hypothesis and accept the alternate one, and we clung on to the null hypothesis, when in reality, it is better than rosuvastatin. This is the reality, but we clung on to the null hypothesis. What sort of error is that? We conclude CCA statin is better than rosuvastatin, when in reality, it is better than rosuvastatin. So, this is better, and we conclude better. No error is made. Wonderful. We conclude CCA statin is better than rosuva, when in reality, they are the same. When in reality, the null hypothesis is true, but we have concluded this is better. That means we rejected the null hypothesis, when in fact we should not have rejected. And what sort of error is that? Just think for a moment.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, go ahead.
And anyway, the presentation I'm going to share with Dr. Desai, and you can have a look at it at a later stage.
Can conclude now, or?
The answer is type 1 error is 4 statement, type 2 error is 2. Now, the normal distribution which our friend is just now talking about, at least how the standard deviation should not be double the standard deviation. It should be there, and the standard deviation should be less than half of the mean. That's what he's saying. If the data is normal distributed, there is an interest on one side, on the right hand side, whether CCA statin is better than the rosuvastatin. If you have an interest on the other side also, this situation which we are seeing is called one-tailed. If we are interested with the rosuva is better than CCA, we are interested in both the sides, then it becomes a two-tailed test. When we are interested in only one-tailed this situation, particularly when we compare a drug with a placebo, we are not interested if placebo is better than the drug. Certainly not. Then all our alpha error, we can focus here. And we need not waste our sample on the other side. That's the one-tailed, this one. Whereas when we are comparing two treatments, the standard and a new, we would like to see both, and we use a two-tailed stat. 2.5% is distributed there, and 2.5% of our error we would distribute here. We would like to be in this zone. When we do and end up with our study, we want our results to be in this zone and not in this zone or in this. Even if they should not, even if they are in this zone, they are less than 5% or 5%. That is the alpha error. This is the two-tailed distribution. Now, one standard deviation is 34% p-value, and one standard deviation is 68%. 68% is one standard deviation, 2 standard deviations is 95%. 3 standard deviations means which is 99%. We use 99% this one and alpha error of 0.001 in a 0.1 in a very sort of stringy situation.
I think it was an excellent talk with nice examples. We understand the difference between the type 1 and type 2 errors. I think Dr. Sharma's presentation was excellent. I don't see any questions on the board here, but I have a question to you. Sometimes we get carried away with just the p-value, and it also depends on the total the study, how it is conceptualized, and what is the power. Both the alpha and the beta error are important. So most of the times, we just look at the p-value and say this is significant, and that may be a wrong conclusion sometimes.
Okay. Now, p-value tells you about the statistical significance. We are not statisticians, right? We are clinicians.
But it is the same as the alpha error. P-value is, let's say p-value is 0.01. Then it is means your alpha error is only 1%.
Yes. 0.01, if you set the p-value at 0.01, if the intervention is very costly, if the intervention is time consuming, if the intervention is dangerous, if the intervention is invasive, we would like to be very sure that 99 out of 100, my result is going to be applicable in the larger setting, right? In such a case, you reduce the p-value to 0.01, whereas normally it is pegged at 0.05. And don't be too much embarked on the p-value or the statistical significance. Unless there is clinical significance, there is no need to do a statistical significance for any observation.
Thank you very much for giving wonderful comments on the previous session. So already the set induction has been done on the critique of p-value. I just need to build up on that particular thing. So p-value is one of the most used, misused, abused terminology in the biostatistics. There was an issue in the Nature. The Nature came with a special issue on the world beyond p-value. Just imagine the kind of situation where the world moved from p-value to the world without p-value. P-value is something which is an obsession for the researchers. We want our data to be statistically significant. Most of the time when we deal with the postgraduates come to us literally crying, sir, my p-values are not coming statistically significant. My boss is scolding me. What shall I do? Then, we will be in a very, very tricky situation. I usually tell them p-value is something not available in the market. Again, go and get it for you. You need to get it for yourself. Okay. So p-value is a very, very tricky situation. Just we'll discuss a p-value which is much criticized. What is this p-value? Can we get rid of this p-value and get something else in its place so that we can have more meaningful statistical components? So this is already has been told by the previous speaker. Statistical significance and clinical significance are two absolutely entirely different entities and never ever got confused. Statistical significance super added by clinical significance is always acceptable. Clinical significance without statistical significance, if the clinician feels this is something which is making the magic, acceptable. Not only statistical significance without the clinical significance, please think 10 times before taking that into the mind. 3 scenarios, both statistically and clinically significant, clinically significant, statistically not significant, statistically significant but clinically not significant. These 3 are very tricky situations. I'll deal with few examples with each one of them. Already the previous speaker has told, whenever we do an intervention, there could be some change. If you give a particular antihypertensive, there is going to be reduction of blood pressure. When compared with the already available treatment, when you give a new intervention, the reduction in the blood pressure, is it a true reduction or it is because of chance? Something can occur because of chance also. If it is a true difference, what is a quantification of it? And what is a probability of this difference to be by chance. If the total outcome is 100, I always consider 95% of the times, whatever difference I observe should be a true difference. And 5% of the times, I am going to allow the error or a chance. That's what Dr. Prabhakar sir was telling just before. 5% I am going to allow some kind of a chance. I'm committing that error. I'm just telling that this could be by chance by 5%. That 5% chance is what we call as alpha error that we discussed so far. Okay, so we quantify to what extent the changes that we observe are the true changes or it is because of chance. Smaller the p-value, you are going to tell with lot of confidence that whatever difference we are observing is a very, very true difference. And larger the p-value, it means that you are allowing large amount of chance to come in. Okay? Let's take this. This is something which we usually use. P should be less than 0.05. I'm trying to write this 0.05 as 5 divided by 100. Is it a problem? Both are same, right? Okay, this much of mathematics, I think all medical people, all of us will know. 0.05 can be written as 5 divided by 100. Can I write this 5 divided by 100 into 5:95? 5 against 95. If there are 100 observations, 95 times the observation could be a true observation and 5 times it could be because of chance. Can I put it as 1 in 20? I'm confusing you for the only reason that if you get confused, my level of statistical significance is going to increase. P-value 0. I'm just expressing p-value in different forms. P-value less than 0.05. 0.05 I wrote as 5 divided by 100. Correct? And there is 5% chance out of 100 times. If it is 5% chance out of 100 times, can't it be 1 in every 20 observation could be because of chance? This is the true interpretation of p-value. If your p-value is 0.1, it means that 10 out of 100 observations are because of chance. You are allowing large amount of chance in that. If your p-value is 0.05, 5 out of 100 could be because of chance. If your p-value is 0.01, 1 out of 100 observations are because of chance. 99 observations are the true observations. And only 1 observation could be because of chance. And if it is 0.001, the probability of chance, the difference to be because of chance could be 1 out of 1000 observations. It means that your p-value is highly statistically significant. This is how we need to interpret p-value. I would be happy to answer if there are any questions at the end related to interpretation of p-value. There is p-value. I always say p-value is a magic number that varies with the sample size. Take larger sample size, your p-value will come statistically significant. This is usually the common thing. When we tell to our students, you could have taken larger sample and it would have come statistically significant. P-value varies with the sample size. If you have a larger sample size, even if the difference is very less, you get statistically significant. Let us take this example. Comparison of triglyceride levels among diabetic and non-diabetic population. Cases, I took 245. Controls, I took 245. And the mean, if you observe here, it is 28.48 and 24.01. There is almost around a 4-point difference between cases and controls, and it has come statistically significant. It means that the cases have higher level of triglycerides compared to the controls. Look at this table. I will, when the sample size, I'm going to reduce it to 50. I'm sorry. Yeah, when we reduce the sample, I don't know why it is not getting projected. When the sample size is less than, if we bring down the sample size to less than 50, what is going to happen is, yeah, look at this. I think it is going to give you a clear picture. Same mean, same standard deviation, p-value has become non-statistically significant. Are you getting the point? P-value is dependent on your sample size. You take a larger sample size and you get the p-value as statistically significant. And the same sample, if you bring down the sample size, even though mean and standard, it's a hypothetical example which I have framed. Sample size is brought down, even though mean and standard deviation remain same, the p-value will become non-statistically significant. This is a reason why p-value has been criticized for centuries. P-value varies with the sample size. You take a larger sample size, even if the difference is less, you get the statistical significance. Even though there is no clinical significance also. Okay, so this is the number game that we usually do with that. P-value is interpreted in 101 ways. P-value is basically to reject the null hypothesis. If the p-value is more than 0.05, we reject the, we fail to reject the null hypothesis. Now let us see what is clinical significance. The clinical significance is defined by the smallest clinically beneficial and smallest clinically harmful values of the effect. These values are usually equal and opposite in sign. Just have a look at it. If this is an intervention, this is a baseline, there is no effect at all. This is a zero effect. And if you look at this difference, this is the smallest clinically beneficial value. It could be reduction in 5 millimeter of mercury blood pressure after you give an intervention. And this is the smallest clinically harmful effect of that particular drug. And this is the observed variation that you get. With a drug given to a particular person, this is the null, absolutely no difference. And this is the least difference you can expect, least improvement you can expect, and this is the least harm you can expect. So what is this observed value? You have got better outcome out of it. Are you getting this? Are you getting this particular explanation? This is no harm, no use, no harm, no gain. Okay, no harm and no benefit at zero. And this is the harm, and this is the least possible benefit you can get from the drug, and this is the outcome. What is your inference here? Your inference is this drug is beneficial because you have achieved something better than what is least required. Let me put it this way. Same graph, I have same figure, I have just put this graph. Doesn't it look beautiful with a standard normal curve? And this is the zero. And what we did here is, this is a beneficial effect of the drug. What is a beneficial effect of the drug? Beneficial effect of the drug is least minimum, that is effect of that particular drug, and what is the observed effect of the drug. This one, this effect plus this effect together constitutes benefit from that particular. Just have a look at this. Here. Now, this is triviality. Triviality is nothing but least smallest harmful effect. I always keep the highest beneficial effect to be around 80%. And least benefit, I want to put it as 0.15. And harmful, I want to keep 0.05. Just take a minute to understand this. I don't want to rush into it. After this, I don't have much slides. I'll repeat. If you give a particular drug, this means absolutely no effect. And this means there is some amount of positive benefit. And this means this is actually the observation that you got. Okay, so I want to keep this as 80%. 80% of my patients should get benefited if I give that particular drug. I'm allowing this triviality to be around 15%. Okay, this chance I'm going to allow it to be around 15%. 80% plus 15% is 95%. This area is a gray zone. We don't know whether it is going to be beneficial or non-beneficial. And this area I want to keep very much least, that is 0.05. This is a reason a lot of people will be thinking, why p-value less than 0.05? Why is that cutoff? The cutoff is I want to allow 95% of the time the benefit to the patient. Out of that, 80% to be the true benefit and 15% benefit of benefit of doubt, and triviality should be less than 0.05. That is 1 by 20. This is what we usually put. This is the benefit 80%. You give the drug 80%, it should be beneficial. 15% benefit of doubt. People fight with this benefit of doubt, I tell you. And this 5% error. And this 5% is our p-value. If you make it as 1%, what is going to happen? This goes further down, yes or no? If you make from 0.05 to 0.01, it goes further down. If you make 0.001, it goes further down. And whatever curve you are going to observe, the area under curve will be the beneficial curve. This is how the clinical and statistical significance have to be interpreted. Look at this. This is an example I usually give during my biostatistics programs to the students. You have mean systolic blood pressure with drug A 124 and drug B 122, and the difference is 2 millimeter of mercury, and your p-value. Look at your p-value. 0.301. It is a statistician's delight. Highly statistically significant. And when you look at clinical significance, 2 millimeter of mercury, maybe 2 millimeter of mercury could be great to the cardiologist like you, but not for a public health professional like me. 2 millimeter of mercury is a very small difference in the systolic blood pressure, but that is showing highly statistically significant. Is it really clinically significant? We need to really answer this question, keeping our all intuitions out. Sometimes the statistical significance may be a delightful number, but it may not be clinically significant. Okay, so keep clinical significance and statistical significance two separate entities. Statistical significance does not necessarily mean the real significance. If the sample size is large, even a very small difference can give a better p-value. Lack of significance does not necessarily mean that the null hypothesis is true. If your sample size is lower, usually this is the easiest easiest solution we give to the students. They come with, sir, no statistical significance. The sample size could have been more. Yeah. This is usually the common explanation if you are doing journal clubs and all. The last sentence could have been, we failed to get statistical significance for the reason that the sample size was too low. Hydroxychloroquine and COVID-19, the study published in New England Journal of Medicine was criticized for not getting statistical significance. Their sample size was lower. Okay, so statistical significance does not mean clinical significance, and no statistical significance does not mean the null hypothesis is true, drug is totally useless. This is all the reason we came out with the meta-analysis, evidence-based medicine. I'm not dependent on one particular study. I will pool data from all different randomized control trials, and I generate my own p-value at the end of the day. That is the reason p-value is more criticized. Okay. These are fallacies due to p-value. Obsessive compulsive p psychosis. People want their results to be p statistically significant. People start their study, it will come statistically significant. Kaise nahi aata yaar? It has to come statistical significance. If it doesn't come, their study is done. No. And some journals, for God's sake, they don't accept the articles where p-value is not, statistically significant. This is the publication bias with the journals also. Nowadays, some journals have come in, they publish the results which are non-favorable, non-significant results are also published by few journals. Sometimes the journals make people, strive for statistical. Next is the research is, people think that the research is useless if p-value is more than 0.05. Students come and start crying in front of us, sir, I did so much of effort, sir. At the end of the day, it did not come statistically significant. What is the use of conducting this study, sir? And for getting p-value, people manipulate data. Fabrication, falsification, data, complete new data into 3, into 4. All those things will come into existence for the p-value. We need to really think whether p-value I got is an ethical p-value or unethical p-value. That only the investigator should be able to tell it. And most important thing is p-value is measure. People think that p-value is a measure of research efficiency. If your p-value doesn't come statistically significant, you are inefficient as a researcher. Okay, and statistical significance is more important than the clinical significance. And sometimes I have put it at the last point. Pharma companies, some kind of a lobbies may also play a role in getting statistical significance, in getting kind of a zeal for going statistical significance. I'm just stopping it. You can just read this. You are completely free to carry out whatever research you want. So as long as you come to these conclusions, you give the conclusions before, and your p-value is also done before itself. Okay, so these are all non-ethical way of research. Okay, so whatever could be the p-value, whatever may be the result of the study, we should not really bother about it. Is it making clinically significant? If there is clinical significance, okay, advise people to do a larger kind of a study with a larger sample size, with more multicentric kind of approaches, and you get, if there is a real clinical significance, you may get it at the end of the day. No, how to get rid of?
Thank you.
Sir, I have another. Do I need to finish, or I have?
Yes, sir. Yes.
There is a way people are thinking of nowadays. The journals are going to accept the 95% confidence intervals than the p-value. What is 95% confidence interval? So it is the other way of interpreting p-value. In p-value, you are talking 5% is an error. In 95% of the 95% confidence interval, you are going to say my observation falls almost 95% of the times between my upper and lower bound of this confidence intervals. Okay, so usually the confidence interval will have an upper bound and a lower bound. How do we actually interpret this 95% confidence interval? I'm just finishing it now. This is the point that we need to remember. In 95% confidence interval, between upper and lower bound, we should not have the null value. This null value is, for this particular table, the null value is 1. Or odds ratio of 1 means there is no association or there is no relationship at all. If your upper and lower bound of confidence interval includes the null value, it means that your data is non-statistically significant. This null value can be 1 or 0. If it is a proportion, if it is a ratio, it is going to be 1. And if it is a difference, it is going to be 0. Please keep in mind, if between upper and lower bound of your statistical significance, if the null value comes, it means that your data is not statistically significant. If the null value doesn't come, it is either on either side of your null value, then your data is statistically significant. So I'm going to end this. I have already shared these slides with sir, with both of you, Dr. Iyengar and Dr. Nagaraj Desai. You can just distribute it among the people, and if there are any comments, I'm going to address. We will not, my entire presentation is a tribute to him, but ultimately at the end of the day, the p-value is important. and it should be always interpreted in a more judicious fashion. Thank you so much.